The throne room of the Red Keep is collapsing. Stone and ash are raining down. The city outside is burning because of a queen who chose fire over surrender when surrender was already won. And right there beneath the rubble, Cersei Lannister dies, clutching the only person she ever truly loved, weeping, not for the thousands burning above her, but because she doesn't want to die. Here is the question at the center of Cersei's entire story. Was she always going to end like this? Was the woman who outmaneuvered every lord in Westeros, who survived the death of 3 children and the loss of 2 kingdoms, was she always destined to die powerless and afraid? Or did something break her along the way that didn't have to break? And more specifically, did the show, by season 8, abandon what George R. Martin had spent 5 books carefully constructing? By the end of this, you will see Cersei Lannister in a way the show never fully let you. Not as a villain, not as a hero, as something far more dangerous and far more human than either of those categories allows. You have to start in Casterly Rock, and you have to understand what it meant to be born there as a girl in the year 266 AC. She was the firstborn child of Tywin Lannister, the most feared lord in Westeros, and Joanna Lannister, a woman described in the world of Ice and Fire as one of the most admired ladies of the court of King Aerys II. Cersei was born into a dynasty, into gold, into expectation. But she was also born with a twin brother, Jaime, and from their first years, the contrast in how the world treated them was stark. Both were golden-haired, both were sharp-minded, both were the children of Tywin Lannister. But Jaime was trained with a sword. Cersei was trained for marriage. Jaime was allowed to become a knight. Cersei was told her value was in her womb and her name. In the books, Cersei reflects on this constantly, and not with acceptance. In A Feast for Crows, her internal monologue returns again and again to the injustice of it. She thinks of how she and Jaime are the same, born of the same womb at the same hour. But the world gave him everything and gave her a cage gilded in gold. The show hints at this resentment but never fully excavates it. Martin's Cersei carries this wound in every decision she makes for the rest of her life. The show's Cersei wears it more as attitude than as psychology. Then came Maggie the Frog. When Cersei was approximately 10 years old, she and 2 companions, one of them a girl named Melara Heatherspoon, snuck out of Casterly Rock and found a wood witch in the woods of the Westerlands. Maggie was old, her teeth black-green, her body ancient. Cersei demanded a prophecy, and Maggie gave her 3 things. First, she would not marry the prince she wanted. Second, the king she would marry would have 20 children, but she would have only 3, and all 3 would wear gold crowns, and all 3 would wear gold shrouds. Third, and this is the one that haunted her, a younger, more beautiful queen would come and cast her down, taking all she held dear. The books add a 4th part of the prophecy that the show never included. Maggie told Cersei, "And when your tears have drowned you, the Valonqar shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you." The word Valonqar means little brother in High Valyrian. That prophecy consumed Cersei for decades. It's the reason she grew to despise Tyrion from childhood. It's the reason she never entirely trusted Jaime, who was born after her, making him technically a little brother too. The show dropped this entirely, and in doing so, it stripped away the central psychological engine of Cersei's hatred toward Tyrion and her deep paranoid relationship with Jaime. In the books, her fear of the Valonqar is not a subplot, it is the spine of her character arc. The other moment from her childhood that the show never fully explored, the death of Melara Heatherspoon. After Maggie gave the prophecy, Melara asked her own question, whether she would marry Jaime Lannister. Maggie told her she would not, and implied she would die young. Shortly after, Melara fell into a well and drowned. In Cersei's POV chapters in A Feast for Crows, she reflects on this with extraordinary coldness, the strong implication being that Cersei pushed her or at minimum let her fall, at 10 years old, to protect the secret of the prophecy. That is the Cersei the books introduce us to, not cruel by nature, but capable of cruelty when cornered by fear. Her mother, Joanna, died during the birth of Tyrion in 267 AC. Cersei was 1 year old. She had no memory of her mother, only the story of how Tyrion had killed her coming into the world. Tywin never recovered from that loss. He became colder, more closed off. Cersei grew up watching her father mourn a woman she never knew, and watching him turn more of his energy toward Jaime and his legacy. The grief in Casterly Rock shaped her. The absence of a mother shaped her. The impossible standard of Tywin Lannister shaped her. And then Maggie's prophecy buried itself inside her like a splinter she could never reach. She wanted to marry Rhaegar Targaryen. Tywin had served as Hand of the King and had aspirations for a match between his daughter and the Crown Prince. Cersei met Rhaegar as a girl and became captivated. The match never happened. Aerys Sedai refused it, reportedly out of contempt for Tywin. Instead, Cersei was married in 284 AC to Robert Baratheon, a man who won the throne through war and who, on their wedding night, called her by another woman's name, Lyanna Stark. She was 17 years old. That is the foundation. Everything Cersei Lannister ever did, every alliance forged, every enemy destroyed, every wall she built around herself, can be traced back to those three facts. A father who showed her that women were currency, a prophecy that told her she would lose everything, and a husband who made clear, on the first night of their marriage, that she was a substitute for someone else. Rise, Queen Lyanna Cage, for 17 years, from 284 AC to 298 AC, Cersei was queen of the Seven Kingdoms and had essentially no power. Robert ruled, drank, hunted, and took mistresses openly. He fathered at least 16 bastard children across the realm, according to the lore established in the books. He gave Cersei a title, a crown, and no authority. She sat at his side at feasts and said what was required of her. But she was not idle. During those 17 years, Cersei built a network of information and influence inside the Red Keep with the tools available to her: servants, ladies-in-waiting, pillow talk, and careful observation. She became an expert reader of people. She understood Robert well enough to manage him, and she understood the court well enough to know which lords could be bought, which could be blackmailed, and which were too principled to be useful. The show largely skips over this period. We first meet her in Season 1, already a fully formed political operator. The books, through her retrospective chapters and A Feast for Crows, let you see how she became one. Her relationship with Jaime began, the books suggest, sometime in their early adolescence, before her marriage. It continued through her marriage. Her three children, Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen, were all fathered by Jaime, not by Robert. This was the central secret of her life, and it was a secret she maintained for nearly 2 decades. The sheer discipline required to sustain that secret, across a court full of spies, with a suspicious husband surrounded by enemies, is genuinely remarkable. Whatever you think of Cersei, she was operating under extraordinary pressure from the day she arrived in King's Landing. The first major political act the show gives us is Season 1. The machinery she puts in motion to eliminate Ned Stark after he discovers the truth about Joffrey's parentage. She doesn't panic. She moves methodically. She secures Jonos Slint and the gold cloaks. She turns Littlefinger, or at minimum reaches an arrangement with him. She outmaneuvers the Hand of the King, the most powerful position in the realm below the king himself, and she does it without a single sword in her own hand. That sequence shows you exactly what Cersei is capable of when she has time to plan and a clear objective. The death of Robert Baratheon in Season 1, which she facilitated by ensuring his wine was sufficiently strong before a hunting trip where a boar found him, gave her what she had never had: a window of genuine power. Her son Joffrey was now king. She was queen regent. For a brief period, she was the most powerful person in King's Landing. Except she wasn't, because Joffrey was already something she couldn't control. The books are significantly more nuanced on this. Martin suggests that Joffrey's cruelty and volatility were shaped not just by nature, but by the environment of the court, and by Robert's contempt and Cersei's overcompensation in the form of permissiveness. She had protected him so fiercely from Robert that she had failed to build any structure around him at all. When he took the throne, he was unmanageable. And this is the part that always gets me. She made him a monster trying to protect him from one. And all of that, everything I just walked you through, was simply the setup. Because what comes next is where Cersei's real story begins, and where the tragedy at the heart of her character becomes impossible to ignore. The peak. The woman. WHO ran The Seven Kingdoms. Most people mark Cersei's peak as Season 6. The wildfire explosion at the Sept of Baelor, the moment she finally decisively destroyed all her enemies in a single act. And they're not wrong. But I want to talk first about an earlier period that doesn't get enough attention, because it shows a Cersei operating at full strategic capacity before her circumstances pushed her toward desperation. During Tyrion's tenure as Hand of the King in Season 2, Cersei and her brother fought a cold war inside the Red Keep while Stannis Baratheon's fleet approached. She was working against Tyrion at every turn, removing people he placed, inserting her own agents, trying to maintain the intelligence network she had built. Tyrion outmaneuvered her repeatedly, including his wildfire trap that stopped Stannis at the Battle of the Blackwater. But what the show doesn't make explicit is this. Cersei independently identified the wildfire stockpiles in King's Landing years before Tyrion did. In A Clash of Kings, it's clear she already knew about the caches left by Aerys Eye. She didn't use them then, she was saving them. She also, during Season 2, made one of the most revealing decisions of her entire arc. During the siege of the Blackwater, as the battle raged and the women of the court cowered in the throne room waiting for news, Cersei sat with Sansa Stark and told her something. She said that tears were not weapons. She talked about the reality of power for women, that their power lay in the men willing to fight for them, that the only thing that mattered in the end was survival. She told Sansa to learn this. It's one of the most honest scenes she ever has in the entire series. Not a manipulation, not a performance, but Cersei being completely real about the world as she had experienced it. Her regency after Joffrey's death and Tommen's ascension to the throne in Season 4 should have been another consolidation of power. Tommen was young, pliable, genuinely sweet, nothing like Joffrey. She could have steered him, built a functioning rule around him, positioned herself as the true authority of the realm. Instead, the book version of Cersei in A Feast for Crows makes a series of catastrophically bad decisions rooted almost entirely in paranoia. Here's what the show doesn't tell you. In the books, when Margaery Tyrell becomes Tommen's queen, Cersei begins to see her as Maggie's promised younger, more beautiful queen. Every warm interaction between Margaery and Tommen registers as a threat. She arms the Faith Militant not as a calculated move to destroy the Tyrells, which is how the show presents it, but partly because she genuinely believes the High Sparrow can be controlled and used as a weapon against Margaery. She is not entirely wrong about this, but she is catastrophically wrong about her ability to control what she has unleashed. The show simplifies her motivation into pure political scheming. The books show a woman whose judgment has been corrupted by a prophecy she cannot stop believing in. Her absolute peak moment, the Sept of Baelor, came in Season 6, Episode 10, The Winds of Winter. Her trial before the Faith Militant was scheduled. Every enemy she had was gathering in one building. She didn't run. She didn't surrender. She had spent months quietly ensuring that the wildfire catches Aerys Eye had hidden under the city. Thousands of jars placed to burn King's Landing rather than let it fall were positioned directly under the Sept of Baelor. She lit them all. The High Sparrow, the Tyrells, Mace, Loras, Margaery, Lancel Lannister, and hundreds of others died in seconds. From her window in the Red Keep, Cersei watched the Sept collapse in green fire with a glass of wine in her hand. It is one of the most chilling images in the entire series. And her son Tommen, watching from another window in the keep, stepped off the ledge. She had won, and in winning, she had destroyed the last thing she had left. Here's the thing most people get wrong about Cersei in Season 6. They read the wildfire sequence as her masterstroke. It was. But it was also the moment the prophecy finally began to come true. Not because of any external enemy, but because of her own hand. The turning point, Whenthe walls came down. The most underanalyzed chapter of Cersei's story is not Season 5's Walk of Shame, though that deserves serious attention. It's the period between Joffrey's death in Season 4 and the wildfire sequence in Season 6, because that is where Cersei makes decisions that are increasingly hard to follow using the logic of the sharp political operator we met in Season 1. In the books, A Feast for Crows is almost entirely her POV, and it reveals a woman who is drinking more, sleeping less, trusting fewer people, and becoming progressively more convinced that she is surrounded by traitors. She fires competent advisors and replaces them with flatterers. She makes Qyburn, a man stripped of his maester's chain for human experimentation, her master of whisperers, and eventually her trusted confidant. She does not do this because Qyburn is reliable. She does it because Qyburn never challenges her. The show condenses this deterioration into a cleaner, more rational arc. Book Cersei in A Feast for Crows is not a villain in full control of her faculties making bold strategic moves. She is a woman in genuine psychological distress, making decisions based on fear and paranoia, and watching everything she built slowly unravel because of it. Martin is unflinching about this. Her chapters are often uncomfortable to read because you can see the logic breaking down in real time, sentence by sentence. The show never let Lena Headey play that version of Cersei fully, because it would have required slowing the pace of the narrative considerably. The Walk of Shame in Season 5 is presented as the breaking point. And in a physical, public sense, it was. The High Sparrow had her stripped, her head shaved, and marched naked through the streets of King's Landing while the crowds of the city, the same people she had ruled and dismissed for years, threw filth at her and screamed, "Shame." It is one of television's most brutal extended scenes. Lena Headey performed the close shots. A body double walked the actual route. The humiliation was designed to break her completely. It didn't, and this is where Cersei reveals something essential about herself. Her capacity to absorb humiliation and convert it into cold, controlled fury is extraordinary. She walks back into the Red Keep bleeding from her feet, the city's contempt still wet on her skin, and her face has already closed. Whatever was left of vulnerability in her, and by this point there wasn't much, died on that walk. The woman who emerges from the keep after that walk is not the Cersei we met in Season 1. She is something stripped down to pure survival instinct. In the books, Martin adds another layer to the walk. Cersei sustains herself through it partly by retreating into fantasy, imagining the deaths she will inflict on everyone responsible. There is a list forming in her mind with every step. The show implied this with her expression, but the books make it explicit and specific. She is not enduring, she is planning. What changed with Jaime, and this is the book show divide that hits hardest, is that the show presented their relationship as a genuine love story complicated by circumstance. The books are far more ambivalent. By A Feast for Crows, Cersei's feelings for Jaime have curdled considerably. She still loves him in a possessive sense, but she has also been using him for years as a tool, an enforcer, and a symbol of her own power. When Jaime in the books refuses to return to King's Landing to help her after Myrcella is attacked in Dorne, and instead sends her a letter, she burns the letter. That is a scene the show never included. It marks the point in the books where their bond begins to fracture structurally, not just situationally. The Fall. Three Crowns and Three Shrouds. By Season 7, Cersei was sitting the Iron Throne she had always been denied. Tommen was dead. The Baratheon and Tyrell dynasties were gone. Tywin had been dead since Season 4. Jaime was still at her side. She was at last Queen of the Seven Kingdoms in her own name. And she was holding it with bare hands against forces that should have been impossible to defeat. Daenerys Targaryen had 3 dragons and 2 armies. Jon Snow had rallied the north. The dead were marching south. Her strategy in Season 7 is fascinating and completely consistent with her character as established. She agreed to the armistice at the Dragon Pit, knowing she had no intention of honoring it. She had already sent for the Golden Company, 20,000 sellswords from Essos, to shore up her position. She let Daenerys and Jon fight the dead, calculating that whoever survived would be weakened. She played the long game. And by the pure calculus of survival, it was not a stupid strategy. It was a cold one. But here is where the show's compression begins to cost Cersei her complexity. The Season 7 armistice scene, where she agrees to a truce, then privately tells Jaime she was lying, marks the final fracture between them. In the show, Jaime rides north. In A Dance with Dragons and the projected continuation of the books, Jaime has been on an entirely different trajectory, one that takes him further away from Cersei not because of a noble choice in the moment, but because he has spent years slowly shedding the identity of being her instrument. The show collapsed this gradual separation into a single scene. It works dramatically, but it loses the weight of Martin's careful construction. The Golden Company, when they finally arrived, brought no elephants, a famously absurd detail that Cersei herself complains about on screen. But it underlines something real. The resources she had left were increasingly unreliable. Euron Greyjoy was her fleet, and Euron was loyal to nothing except personal ambition. She allowed him into her bed and let him believe she was carrying his child. She was pregnant, but by Jaime. This was her last piece of political maneuvering, and it was small, desperate leverage against a man she couldn't fully trust, using the one tool she had always had, the management of information about her own body. And then Daenerys burned the Iron Fleet. Then Rhaegal, already wounded, was killed by Euron's scorpions. Then Missandei was executed on the walls of King's Landing on Cersei's order in front of Daenerys and Grey Worm. That execution was the last meaningful decision Cersei made in the series, and it was a catastrophic miscalculation because Missandei's death did not break Daenerys' resolve. It removed the last person who might have counseled restraint. I need you to remember something from earlier in this script. The conversation Cersei had with Sansa at the Blackwater, where she said the only thing that matters is survival. Her entire life had been organized around that principle. And when Daenerys' dragon burned through the city in Season 8, Episode 5, Cersei stood at the window of the Red Keep and watched it. And you could see the moment she understood that this time there was no move left. The survival instinct that had powered her for 30 years had finally hit a wall it couldn't climb. The collapse of the Red Keep in Episode 5, The Bells, is where the show's handling of Cersei becomes most controversial. After Daenerys begins burning the city indiscriminately, even after the bells of surrender have rung, the show shifts focus away from Cersei almost entirely. We see her in short cuts, watching from the window, then retreating, then running, then found by Jaime in the dungeons. The final scene of the two of them trying to escape, only to find the exit blocked by rubble, and Cersei weeping and saying she doesn't want to die, with Jaime holding her and saying nothing else matters, only us. It is designed to be moving, and Lena Headey delivers it well. But it does not feel like the end of a Cersei Lannister story. It feels like the end of a love story that happened to include Cersei. The woman who organized her entire life around never being at another person's mercy, who walked naked through a city rather than bend a knee, died clinging to someone else, asking him to save her. Whether that is tragic irony or narrative betrayal is the central debate about her arc. Legacy, WHATTHE Lion left BEHIND. In death, Cersei Lannister achieved something remarkable. She fulfilled every element of Maggie the Frog's prophecy. 3 children, Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, all dead before her. Gold crowns, gold shrouds. A younger and more beautiful queen did cast her down. Daenerys Targaryen literally burned her kingdom out from under her. And in the show, she was not strangled by a Valonqar. She was crushed by rubble. The book's prophecy, if Martin ever reaches this point in the written story, may yet be fulfilled differently. What Cersei left behind in the political structure of Westeros is substantial. The empowerment of the faith militant, even though she destroyed the High Sparrow, had already changed the relationship between church and crown in ways that couldn't be easily reversed. Her use of Qyburn and the Little Birds, a spy network originally built by Varys and then taken over and expanded, represents a model of intelligence gathering through the margins of society that persisted beyond her. The Golden Company contract, the Euron alliance, the Wildfire massacre, all of these things shaped the political landscape that Bran Stark inherited when he was elected king. Her longest-lasting legacy, though, is not political. It is the object lesson she represents for the system she spent her life inside. Cersei Lannister was arguably the most politically intelligent person in Westeros. More strategic than Ned Stark, more adaptable than Stannis, more patient than Robb, and she spent her entire life being denied the formal authority to exercise that intelligence. When she finally seized that authority, the paranoia accumulated over decades had already compromised her judgment. She was not destroyed by external enemies. She was destroyed by the combination of a system that had trapped her and a prophecy she could not stop believing. In multiple interviews, George R.R. Martin has spoken about Cersei as a character defined by her relationship to power and by the particular cruelty of being intelligent in a world that refuses to give intelligent women legitimate outlets for their abilities. He has said that her chapters in A Feast for Crows were among the most difficult he wrote, that getting inside her head required him to understand how someone could be both completely right about the injustice done to them and completely wrong about the methods they use in response to it. That tension, righteous grievance producing terrible action, is what makes her a Martin character and not simply a TV villain. FINAL take, THE Lion ANDTHEKH. So, was Cersei Lannister a hero? No. The body count attached to her decisions is enormous, and she rarely expressed remorse for any of it. Was she a villain? Also, no, or at minimum, not in any satisfying, reductive sense of that word. Here's what she was: the most fully realized portrait in the entire series of what happens when a system built on the denial of legitimate power to half its population produces a person who is smart enough to see exactly what has been done to her and damaged enough by it to destroy everything around her in response. The show's Cersei is a great performance. Lena Headey did extraordinary work with material that increasingly asked her to carry scenes with very little dialogue and no interior access. But the show's Cersei is a simplified version of Martin's creation. The book version is messier, more paranoid, more self aware, and more self deceiving simultaneously. The book version has a prophecy running through her skull in nearly every chapter. The book version pushed a 10-year-old girl into a well. The book version is not the composed, wine glass holding schemer of television. She is a woman fighting a war against her own fear and losing. The Valonqar prophecy, if Martin follows it to its conclusion, almost certainly points to Jaime, her twin, born after her, literally her little brother by minutes. There is a strand of evidence in the books suggesting Tyrion also qualifies, and Martin has never explicitly confirmed the resolution. But the weight of Cersei's own psychology points toward Jaime. She knew it. She couldn't stop loving him anyway. That is not a plot convenience. That is the specific, unflinching logic of how love and terror can occupy the same space in a person for their entire life. The central question I asked at the beginning: was Cersei always going to end like this? Or did something break her that didn't have to break? The answer the books give us is both. The system she was born into was designed to break someone like her. Maggie's prophecy planted a splinter of fear so deep that no amount of power could reach it. Robert's contempt confirmed what the system had already told her: that she was valued for what she could produce, not for what she was. And Tywin's relentless instrumentalism taught her that the only safety was control of information, of people, of outcomes. She built an empire of control. She lost it piece by piece. She held the Iron Throne. Her children were already dead. And in the end, the most powerful woman Westeros had ever produced died in the dark, underground, asking not to die. Not for the city, not for her dynasty, not for the legacy of House Lannister, but simply because she did not want to stop existing. After everything, after every calculation, every cruelty, every alliance forged and broken, every wall built around every wound, what Cersei Lannister wanted at the very end was the same thing she had wanted since she was 10 years old in a forest outside Casterly Rock, hearing a witch tell her everything she was going to lose. She wanted to survive. The tragedy of Cersei Lannister is not that she failed. It is that she succeeded at everything the world asked of her: beauty, marriage, children, influence, survival, and the world took all of it anyway, exactly as Maggie promised. She spent her entire life fighting a prophecy, and in fighting it, she made every step of it come true. The lions of House Lannister always pay their debts. Cersei paid hers, in gold, in blood, and in everything she loved. And at the end, there was nothing left to buy.